Rot is an ARG brought to you by the brilliant minds behind Angel Hair. On the surface, it is a social experiment where the viewer judges the guilty. But what if I told you there's a deeper, darker story being told right under our noses? Before I continue, I would like to ask if you want the full context of the Rot series to go over to East Patch's YouTube channel and watch the playlist that they have there. I will not be recapping the whole series, and whatever I say here will not do the series justice, so go over there and check it out. Now, the thing that sparked our minds theorizing was the opening statement of Dr. Douglas Keene, where he stated he blew up the medical bay because he found an unsanctioned lab doing tests on bodies, post-mortem research into using those bodies as resources.
In the storage area beneath the terminal conditions floor, I discovered an unsanctioned lab. It was clearly assembled with the express intention of researching post-life repurposing.
For some of us, this brought to mind the first Rot case we oversaw, the case of Elias True.
Yes, I'm in charge of elder care. Yes, I encourage some families to expedite their end-of-life plans, but that isn't coercion. I laid out the options, that's all. In my experience, dragging out Grandma's last days only makes things worse. Now, the part that will sound bad, and I understand how it looks, but hear me out, is where I then took the remaining doses of Grandma's prescriptions and sold them.
Elias True convinced an unknown number of families to expedite, as he says, the end-of-life process for their elderly. Now, his case would have you believe that he did this to get his hands on the medicine and sell it to other members of Concreta. But I believe that that was only a small perk to the real crime that Elias True was committing.
Prescriptions are a restricted resource. A lot of people are on a never-ending wait list and can't justify their medical needs to our board of insufferable doctors. No offense to any insufferable doctors listening, or, maybe a little.
Now, insufferable doctors can be interpreted one of two ways, or maybe even both. He could be talking about the insufferable Dr. Keene, who I believe caught him in the act of selling the medicine, and turned in said information to the authorities who caught him on camera selling the drugs. Or he could be referring to the insufferable doctors who are pushing him to expedite the process of ending these elderly people's lives so they can get their bodies. Now you're probably wondering, what does Elias get out of this? What is his reward for getting these bodies to these doctors? Well, it is the 100% profit from selling the medicine.
Where did the money go? I can say with authority that Mr. True retained all the resources gained from trading medication.
Whoa, wait. You make that sound terrible. Of course I kept it. I was taking on all the risk.
So Elias gets the profit from selling the drugs and a crime he can easily spin to be a positive crime, so he gets released instead of ostracized or terminated. And the doctors get their bodies. Also, it probably helps that they get some of those patients off their back who want that medicine. A win-win for our doctors. But that all came to an end when Elias was called to Rot. So how would they get their bodies now? Well, I believe Elias True and the doctors came up with the plan to target the rations. As you can see here, True runs for Community Rations Officer. Does he get the job? Well, no. It goes to a man named Abe Knighton, which I believe the doctors are working with. Now, why would they go with Abe instead of Elias? Well, it's simple. If Elias got caught doing this, people would start asking more questions. Elias does not take this well. And I believe that he feels so double-crossed by the doctors that he tells Dr. Keene about their little lab setup. Now, did he know Dr. Keene would blow it up? Maybe. And if he did know Dr. Keene would blow it up, if he did persuade him to, then it's a win-win for him. He probably didn't like Dr. Keene, and Dr. Keene would have to go up to Rot, and he would get his revenge on the doctors who double-crossed him. Now you're probably asking, what would the doctors do to the rations to get them more bodies? Well, isn't it obvious? they poisoned them. And now you're probably asking, wouldn't that make the bodies useless? And why would they get the idea to poison the rations? Well, what if I told you they already did a test run? I will be honest, I wasn't sure of how to present this next part, but I decided to go with giving you guys the full context of the situation. But I promise by the end you will understand what I meant by they already tried poisoning people with rations. But as I said, first we need to talk about Linus Whistle and how he went from his boring job in comms to becoming part of maintenance because his friend, Brody Lone, gave him a referral.
My buddy, Brody, he got me a gig on pipe maintenance. Brody Lone, the senior steam mechanic, he said a few lug nuts here and a few wrenches there were all the job really took. I mean, that sounded pretty easy to me, and I'd have taken any job to get off comms verification.
So you got the job through a referral?
Yes, I suppose.
If you couldn't tell by the way I said it earlier, Brody Lone is not Linus Whistle's friend. In fact, he is actually working with the doctors in this conspiracy, taking advantage of Linus's dislike for his job to transfer him to maintenance to open up a place in comms so they can fill it up with their own person. I mean, explain to me why someone who's a senior steam maintenance officer put someone like Mr. Whistle in charge of a job that is so sensitive that if you're not paying attention, it does that much damage.
Mr. Whistle, how did you get qualified to work on exterior storage tanks?
Well, it wasn't exterior tanks I really had qualifications for. I've not really got any business working out there, and it turns out that's for the best.
And I don't think I'm the only one who found this suspicious. I think our Officer Terman also found this, and something else Mr. Whistle said. Very suspicious.
We're all just trying to figure out life up here. Are any of us really qualified?
Mr. Whistle?
Sorry, but have you seen some of the doctors running around?
Have you seen some of the doctors walking around? Now, I think Officer Terman, like myself, heard that and thought, why would the doctors be unqualified? I believe this, plus Mr. Lone's referral, started making Officer Terman ask questions and snooping around where people did not want him snooping around. In comes in Mrs. Whistle, Mrs. Abaca Whistle.
Please regard your peer, Mrs. Abaca Whistle, a food distribution tech and registered Cycle 1 parent. She is before you today on the case of calculated and willful murder.
In fear of Officer Terman making them his last big case before retirement, the conspirators incite an already disgruntled Abaca Whistle who has petitioned for something to be done about Officer Terman. Well, with a little pushing, something was done.
I tampered with his rations and poisoned him. When everyone trusts me with their food.
To be more specific, Mrs. Whistle laced a morning ration with hull bonding agent. The acid killed him quickly, and he died alone in his quarters.
I believe the doctors found out poisoning a body this way would make it still viable for what they need the bodies for, as we stated earlier. But there was something about that did not sit right with me. How did she get her hands on hold bonding agent? I mean, her job is in food distribution, not maintenance. And this is a woman who can't get her hands on feathered pillows. So how did she get the agent? Well, from a family friend known as Mr. Lone, who I also believe convinced her to go on with the deed. I mean, he probably came up to her and said, "Hey, don't you think it was a little harsh how he was interrogating Linus? Don't you think he was not letting Linus say his piece, not letting him speak? Maybe something should be done about this Officer Terman." And also, I mentioned that Officer Terman was retiring soon. Do we even know if he was? I mean, Officer Medina didn't confirm or deny it. The only person who said he was retiring soon was Abaca Whistle. And she could have just heard that from Mr. Lone. So he probably pushed her to get angrier and angrier and said, hey, here's some hold bonding agent, put it in his food. And that is how she got the hold bonding agent to poison Officer Terman's. And that's how they got their body and found out that they could poison the rations to get more bodies. But now you have another question. Why did they need someone in comms in the first place? If you paid attention to this series so far, you probably noticed that there's been red text coming up on the screen, and the screen sometimes glitches out and freezes on some particular words. What is this, you may ask? I believe this is our conspirators trying to use their position in comms to hack into the communication device in the Rot Room to control the vote in Rot. I don't know if currently they're trying to sway us with direct or subliminal messages, but what I can tell you is that I believe they had success in the past. Don't believe me? Well, let's look at the case of Elias Whistle again.
Elias Whistle was called to Rot for gross negligence of maintenance duties. He ended up ostracized by popular vote.
Something about that verdict does not feel right to me. I mean, it is true that there was severe damage caused by Mr. Whistle, but Officer Medina doesn't say that anybody was hurt nor killed. And throughout his interrogation, nothing suggests that someone was hurt or killed either. So why did we ostracize him? Why did we decide to let True be released? Someone who has pushed people into the end of their life and then sell their medicine to illegal acts, but someone who was just really bad at a job they shouldn't have been in get ostracized. To me, I feel like they use their position in comms to use subliminal messaging to get people to vote ostracize. Granted, they couldn't get people to vote terminate because I feel like that was too severe of a punishment. But they definitely, well, in my opinion, not definitely, they used their power to get Elias Whistle ostracized. And why? Because if he was released, he would have been taken out of maintenance and put back in his old job in comms, effectively removing their inside man from that position. Now, with that out of the way, there is a question from the first part that we still haven't answered. What are they using the bodies for? I would like to take this time to read an advertisement that plays on your mini screen. Want to lose some weight? Donate some fat to the science labs for 0.5 extra holiday rations. Something I found odd about this message is no one on Concreta looks particularly overweight to me. And also, their food is being rationed, which means there wouldn't be anybody overweight. I think this message is just a cover-up. A way to say we got the fat from donators, when in reality, they're harvesting it from dead bodies. And it makes sense too. Remember, Mr. Whistle said that it feels like some of the doctors are unqualified. That's because they are. They're not doctors. They're scientists that got in to the medical wing through referrals. And they're taking the dead bodies, harvesting them for their fat, and getting it to the science lab. Or even using the secret lab that Dr. Keene found as a makeshift science lab before they can move it all to the actual science lab for more proper testing. At the end of the day, is this all just the mad ramblings of some guy who has way too much time on his hands? Maybe. But there are some questions that need to be asked. What are they using the fat or the bodies for? Who is behind this secret society? And also, are Officer Gray and Officer Medina dating? And do they hold hands when no one's looking?
They do.
Well, that's all I wanted to answer. You guys can deal with this conspiracy stuff. Cue the Baragon.